Dimitrios Patelis we have introduced yesterday and in our spontaneous plenary yesterday in the evening, and also just now with the plenary. Dimitrios Patelis is a professor of philosophy in Crete. He has studied in the Soviet Union in the 80s. More than 10 years you have been in the Soviet Union before the counter-revolution in the Soviet Union and during the yes, like from the 80s until the 91, I think you were in the Soviet Union. Dimitrios Patelis was a member of the communist youth of Greece, so the youth of the Kukue, when you were young. I guess so. So, maybe you can also explain later yourself. If you have questions, you can pose it. And he was then also in the Kukue, and he left the Kukue during the Perestroika time because of the positions of or support actually, of the Greek Communist Party for the Perestroika. And but this is not the same Kukue it is the same Kukue, but it's not exactly the same Kukue, but it has been changes after this time where there was a support of the Perestroika, and so still you are not a member of the Kukue anymore, let's say, put it this way, and you have been organizing students from the Soviet Union in Greece. That is one point, and also now you have a group called, maybe you can help me again with the name. Unification of Humanity. I think that was the Revolutionary Unification of Humanity. And if you have questions about this, you can post it also to Dimitrios. What are we going to talk about now? Dimitrios has put some theses in papers that you have written about a third world war that is already going on. So we are already in a third world war, and we want to actually concentrate on this question in this point of the program that we're now. And we then want to go further to the question of how or what is the task of communists and the working class movement in this situation. But in the first part of our session, we want to concentrate on the question of what does that mean when you talk about the Third World War, which is already going on. Because, well, we know world wars, First and Second World War, and we know them as inter-imperialist wars. And especially we know them as inter-imperialist wars where the imperialist centers have been involved very much in the World War. And in the perception of us living in the centers of imperialism, is something like a world war is something that we have to be involved in. So anything which happened after 45 was not a world war from how we call it. It has never been called in the published opinion, also not in the communist movement, as a world war. So you are saying we are already in a world war, and I would like you to try and explain to us what you exactly mean by that. And we will listen to Dimitrios around half an hour. And so be prepared for this. We want to really understand this point before we ask the question of what are we going to do in this situation. Okay, so I give you the word, and very thankful to them. And then after the half an hour, you can pose questions.
Thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you very much for coming here to discuss such interesting and important issues for our movement. From the beginning, I have to tell you that I'm a professor, but this is not my main place of reference in a more scientific and psychological approach. Why? Because being a professor in a bourgeois university is, of course, something which gives you some possibilities, but you have to fight if you insist on your class position, if you insist on your theory, and if you insist to be a Marxist scientist. Okay? For me, the reference group is the world revolutionary movement. The reference group are you and all our people with which we have common goals. So, to talk about the character of the ongoing war, it's necessary from the scientific point of view to identify the character of the era, the character of the nowadays stage of our society, not only capitalist system, but our society as a whole, as a totality, all over the world. Okay? And we have to identify the interests as a result of the conflict of which we have that war. The interests, that means the contradictions, the main contradictions, according to which we have a conflict of interests, such a conflict which cannot be solved other ways except by war. Because war is the open violence, open and massive violence in a struggle for life or death, for superiority between classes, between states, and between alliances of states. Okay? So, we have to identify what sort of political goals had and have the main subjects which are involved to that war, to identify the character of that war. To do that, it's necessary, it's not enough. I was trying to prove in the panel that it's not enough to use a simplifying approach like geopolitics approaches, etc. It's necessary to go deeper and to find out the inner contradictions, the inner laws, the inner logic of history, of humanity. So, firstly, I have to mention that we have a very complicated war. A very complicated war in a very complicated world. In that complicated world, we have not separated capitalist system and imperialist system. Real happiness. We have the capitalist world, which is separated, and it's a very contradictory word. But the capitalist world's contradictions are correlated with other contradictions. I have to remind that according to the Marxist political economy, the main contradiction of capitalist system is the contradiction between labor and capital. Okay? This contradiction in a classical way was investigated by Karl Marx in his capital. I have to mention that capital is not a completed research. Not because of the limits of the biological life of Karl Marx, the genius and genius researcher, scientist, and leader of the revolutionary movement, but because of the limits of his era. You know, the most genius researchers can go through the centuries sometimes, and their achievements are farther than the common limits of their historical period. But they can't avoid the real conditions of the real historic period of their life. What I mean? I mean that according to the science we have science when the upper form of reality of complicated systems, and the most complicated system is society, economy of society, civilization, culture, society as a whole in the history, as a structure, a developing structure, as a totality, okay, is the most complicated subject for research, the most complicated. So we have to have the method which allows us the best way of investigating such a complicated object in the science. Okay? That method is the dialectical method, which was developed at a very high level by Karl Marx in his Capital. This is not the same method as Hegel's method. They have too many things in common, but there are too many differences. But this is another issue. Why do we need a scientific method to research an object like capitalism, like the society as a totality, not only capitalism? Because we have to achieve three fundamental functions of the science. And Marxism is a science. This is not just one science. Marxism is at the fundament of the sciences of our era, beginning from the 19th century. If you wish, Marxism is the beginning of the synthetic science of the future. And we have to approach Marxism in such a way, just developing Marxism. Okay? So we have to do what? We have to describe objectively the existing object of our research. We have to explain and give interpretation of the necessity of the laws of the law-governed processes in that object, to explain. And according to the first and the second, we have to predict the spectrum of the future possibilities for developing that object. Okay? Without that, we have no science, no Marxism. Who tells you that he's a Marxist or she is a Marxist and is not doing that fundamental functions of the science, it just is not a Marxist. Believe me. I can prove that. This is not our item now. So, to describe, to explain, and to predict we have to have a complex dialectical approach to the society as a whole, but not to the society in a separated state, for example, in Germany, not in the society in a separated continent, for example, in Europe, and not just a moment of the society, but the society as an organic whole, as a totality, through the history, where we have the structure and the diachronical development of that object, of that totality. This is the necessity of the new level of science, theory and methodology, which was founded by my teacher, Viktor Alexeyevich Vazulin, a professor of Moscow State University. He was died in 2012. And according to his achievements, we have a collective, international collective. We are trying to develop our theory in nowadays in several aspects. This is a necessity, believe me, and during fundamental crisis and war, those necessities appears very clear. Of course, talking using analogies in history is not the best way. But let me to mention just an analogy. For example, during the First World War, the so-called orthodoxy of Marxism, the ideologists of Second International, including Kautsky, Bernstein, etc., they had some sort of approach to the reality of that era. Okay? And they used to say that any other approach is not a real Marxist approach, is not an orthodoxy of Marxism. Okay? But some of the Marxists, led by Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, known as Lenin, and Bolsheviks, had another approach to the reality. They understood that they have to develop Marxism because of the goals of the era and the situation, because of the war, because of the crash of Second International, because of the character of the new states of capitalism. Developing theory in that period, I mean the researchers of Lenin in that period about Marxist political economy of imperialism, he didn't throw out the classical achievements of Marxist political economy of capital. He had done something else. He moved the level of the approach in another stage of developing theory, developing science. Taking in account the achievements of classical Marxian political economy, he developed the Marxist political economy, especially for the stage of monopolistic capitalism, imperialism. The representatives of so-called orthodoxy of that period blame him as a revisionist. Do that reminds you something in our era? So, that revisionist, Lenin, understanding that the only way for existence of Marxist revolutionary theory and science is developing according to the needs, the inner and deeper needs of humanity, the deeper needs of revolutionary movement, made it easy for the revolutionaries of that era to understand what imperialism is, what place in that imperialism have the national question. What is the national question? The national question is the question about the new states and about the new appearances of the main contradiction of capitalism. The main contradiction, I told you, is because between labor and capital. Okay, this contradiction in the imperialist period took the form of contradiction between a small group of countries, imperialist countries, parasites by Lenin, which are exploiting all over the world and extracting super value in the form of super profits, monopolistic super profits. Okay? So, to have the conditions, to have the possibility to have victorious revolution, you have to deal with the practical conclusions of the new theory of political economy. The unequal development and the exploitation all over the world during the imperialism is a necessity, and according to that necessity, we have contradictions, inner and all over the world. The combination of contradiction, inner contradictions in any country or any group of countries, and the contradictions all over the world during the monopolistic stadium of capitalism, give us the revolutionary situation. What is the revolutionary situation? Is the complexity of a hub of contradictions, where we have the most possibilities for victorious revolutions. But the revolutionary situation is just an aspect of the objective means for the revolution. There is a necessity for subjective aspects of the revolution, and mainly the preparation of revolutionary subjects, social, political, cultural, ideological, etc. subject, and theoretical, scientific level is very important for the making of that subject. If you wish, of course, to have victorious revolutionary movement and not something else. Okay? So, according to all that, I have to tell you that, of course, is a very great spectrum of questions and aspects of such a complicated object for research. But I have to focus on some aspects. According to our researches, we have a new stadium of a new stage of capitalism nowadays, new stage of imperialism, if you wish. Why? And a new stage of war, because, to my opinion, the war, the so-called world wars, are not separated facts in the history. The war is a spiral movement of any crucial stage of capitalism. From the beginning of monopolistic stadium until nowadays. And this is, I can explain that telling you that the First World War was a result of the first global structural systemic crisis of capitalism at the end of 19th century. And the main point of that war was the struggle between imperialist countries, parasites, in the terminology, Lenin's terminology, for what? For colonies. But why? Because capitalism and every system, but in capitalism we have a clear scientific possibility to understand that, they are developing not just in a linear way. They are developing in a very contradictory way. And they are developing, firstly, to the direction of external, extensive development, and then to the internal. Development which firstly is a development of the same technology and organization of production, and then is a development according to the scientification of productive process using achievements of science and technology, and reorganizing, restructurizing the production, the way of production. Okay? So, the First World War, of course, was a war between imperialist powers. We had some specifications. We had revolutionary situations, not only in Russia. And we have to take into account something which is missing sometimes between Marxists. Russia is not just Russia. Russia is a specific country with a specific history, with contradictions not only of developing capitalism of those days, but contradictions with the metropoly of capitalism, making of the metropoly capitalism and their colonies, and contradictions between elements of feudal and before feudalism elements with the capitalist development. The specification of Russian empire of that period was that the colonies were geographical beside the Russia, not over the ocean, as in England, for example, or as in France, etc. So, Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, had to deal with that. When Lenin was talking about the structure of imperialism and the national question as the main question in revolution, the so-called Marxist orthodoxy was blaming him, including Rosa Luxemburg, not only Kautsky, that this is not a Marxist approach, but that was a Marxist approach according to the development of political economy of Marxism of that stage, of that period, of that era. And according to the achievements of Lenin's theory, because of the revolutionary situation. Okay? So we had the first war. The first war was something like a necessity. All the imperialists had their own goals in that war. They were writing, rewriting several plans, what to do, if, etc. But the history is not going by plans of the ruling classes only. As a result of that war, we had revolutionary situations in several countries, not only in Russia and colonies. We had revolutionary situations in Germany, in Hungary, in Finland, even in Austria. Okay? They were defeated. The only victorious revolution was the Great October Revolution. As a result of an intra-imperialist war, we have the first great victorious early socialist revolution. This is changing all the world. We can't understand until that period. We can't, until nowadays, beginning from that period, we can't understand what is happening without taking in account the essential, the inner differences of the system from the beginning of the first victorious socialist revolution. The character, the whole character of the world is changing. The era of the socialist revolutions is beginning, and beginning correlated with the inner law-governed process of the war, world war, very great war. And in that period, for example, if you take the 94 war between Japan and Russia, nobody could understand that this is something correlated with a war, world war, but it was. And after that, we had the first revolution, revolutionary situation, 1905, 1907. And the revolution was defeated, etc. But the main revolution was when the conflict took the global scale. Okay? So, we had the first revolution as a result of the First World War, as a result of the first structural crisis of the system. The structural crises of the system are coming in some decades, and they are correlated with inner changes in the way of production, including the technology of production and the scale of production. For example, at the beginning of the 20th century, we had the technological shift. We had the first electrification in industry. We have the first stage of the scientific technological revolution using electricity, electric energy in industry. We had the Fordist and Taylorist systems, etc. Then we had the Second World War. Second World War seems like a continuing First World War. And by the most of the people was accepted as something like that. And there were too many difficulties to define what sort of war is that. We had the crisis of 1929-33. And as a result of that crisis, we had shifts at the political systems of bourgeois imperialist states. We had fascism and Nazism before the war, and militarization of those forms of state monopolistic capitalism. Why? Do you think that all that will be possible without the Great October Revolution? This is a rhetoric question. The world is changing. And the existing process of revolutionary progress of humanity in Soviet Union dictates a more organized and deeper war against communism. The most militant powers against communism were and are the fascist powers. Okay? So fascism and Nazism, this is not by accident. This is not just an issue of the form of the dictatorship of the ruling class. Yes, it's an issue of the form, but in such a situation where because of the crisis and because of the uprising war, World War, you have to militarize society in such way which is possible to continue the to solve the contradictions and to continue the development according to the interests of one or another imperialist power. Okay? I don't want to occupy your time, but after the Second World War, the world was changed in a very rapid way in several directions. We had the group of early socialist countries, of course in Europe, not without the helpful presence of the Red Army, and we know what that means. Objectively, we have to have a different approach to the early socialist revolutions and early socialist countries. Is one way, according to the inner forces, to have a victorious revolution, and it's another way by the power of other forces, for example, of Red Army, to have help to build socialism, some kind of socialism. For example, when Red Army was approaching Romania, there was an illegal communist party with about 154 members, and the Soviets were trying to find out who is the leader to give him the power. Do you understand the difference? So we have the mainly the inner powers, and those are one way or another classical revolutions, and we have other revolutions which, without the helpful pressure of catalytic other powers, they couldn't take place. I suppose that Eastern Germany included in that, if you agree with me. Okay? So, after that, we had an explosion of anti-imperialist movements all over the world against colonies, colonial powers, etc. Because of the support of the socialist countries, and firstly, because of the support of Soviet Union. We had the greatest, according to the population revolution, the Chinese Revolution. We had the great Korean Revolution, Vietnamese Revolution, Laos, etc. Then we had the Cuban Revolution. And we had too many anti-imperialist movements, revolutionary movements, which were systematically helped military, financially, ideologically, etc., from the socialist countries, early socialist countries. So, to have a scientific approach to every stage of capitalism, it's not possible without taking in account the dialectics of the totality and the dialectics of the development of early socialist revolutions. What early socialist revolutions mean? Firstly, that those revolutions take place in countries where the contradictions appears in the form of revolutionary situation, but which countries are not the most developed in the technological, at the technological level, at the level of infrastructures, of the culture, etc. And the revolutions have to resolve problems which are not solved by the capitalist development. And the early revolutions take place in such a situation where the correlation of the forces all over the world is not in the side of socialism. The capitalist, the imperialist powers are more powerful all over the world. Okay? Those are the early revolutions. Why the early revolutions? Because talking using an analogy, for example, the transition of the society from feudalism to capitalism in the most progressive European countries took minimum 5 centuries. All the early bourgeois revolutions are defeated by counter-revolutionary process. All of them. We have to learn the history. All of them. We had too many cycles of revolutionary and counter-revolutionary processes until the late bourgeois revolutions, including the classical French Revolution. For example, do you think that the French classical revolution was the last? No way. We had again bourgeois democratic revolutions in the 30s of 19th century. Comuna, for example, in Paris, is not a clear proletarian revolution. It's not a clear proletarian. It's the first early proletarian revolution, but the situation was more complicated because too many problems of the capitalist development were not solved in that period also. But the center of the world revolutionary process is moving from the developed capitalist countries to the less developed capitalist countries, to countries with a medium level or near the medium level of development. Somebody thought that the most important is being very poor to have revolution. No way. In some countries where they don't have only problem of food, but even problem of water, even elementary problems of everyday life, the people cannot fight. This is a complicated issue, but take, please, in account that this is not a linear process again. This is not the poorest are the more revolutionary. Okay? So after that, we had what? We had counter-revolutions. Of course, all the counter-revolutions in Eastern Europe were very easy. We can fix that during the end of 40s in Eastern Germany, during the middle of 50s, 56 in Hungary, during the 60s, 68 in Czechoslovakia, etc. It was easier for the counter-revolutionary powers to fight in those countries where the socialism has not a victorious result because of the inner forces. Okay? So all the counter-revolutionary processes in Eastern Europe took place definitely when the counter-revolution was victorious in Soviet Union. Why it was victorious in Soviet Union? Because in socialism we have contradictions. Only in the dogmatic mind we have socialism without contradictions. The main contradiction of early socialism and every socialism is the contradiction between formal socialization of the production and real socialization of production. Formal socialization of production is making everything public property. Okay, this is a formal way. But the point is to make public and under scientific plan developing only the economies, the productive processes and forces which achieving a high level of real technical socialization, high level of technology, and elements of automation. Automation is a very essential aspect of technological progress in society. So, we had counter-revolutions, okay, but we had countries which continue to develop socialism one way or another. And to tell you the truth, as a Soviet-educated young man in that period, I was not pro-Maoist in my approach during the 70s, 80s, etc. Why? Because of the conflict between Soviet Union and China. The conflict between Soviet Union and China is not a conflict between Mao Zedong and Stalin, or Mao Zedong and Khrushchev. It's more complicated. And that conflict make it clear that even during the socialist period, the early socialist revolutions are not achieving such a level of integration and socialist cooperation between each other, which allows them to fight effectively against the common enemy. What happened in the 70s? We had a strategic game from the USA. You remember Kissinger? Okay, we had a strategic game taking the China to the place of USA, cooperation with USA against Soviet Union. And they managed it one way or another. And they began, you have to take into account the historical specification of China. They had less developed productive powers than Soviet Union at the beginning, less developed. Of course, they had the helpful presence of Soviet Union and the developed industrial revolution, etc. But it was not enough. It was not enough. So, because all that conflicts, we had in a difficult and complicated way some countries which continue their development of socialist building. And I remember very well how careful Chinese comrades were researching the experience of so-called perestroika, the beginning of the openly counter-revolution in Soviet Union. And you remember the Tiananmen events in 1989. They took their lessons. So they were developing their economy using the instruments of central planning, socialist planning, and using the instruments of commodity money relations. Okay? Commodity money relations are necessary for the development of socialism, especially the early socialism, are necessary. So, of course, I'm talking a lot, but in conclusion, I have to say the next. The nowadays war is, of course, the Third World War. This is clear from the point of view of my research. This is more clear than it was clear, for example, that the aggressive policies of Italian fascism to Africa at the end of 20s, at the beginning of 30s, was part of a Third World War. Or the attack to Manchuria in 1951-52 was a part of the Second World War. Or the so-called civil war in Spain, 36, was a part of the Second World War. But they were a part of Second World War. Excuse me. Have a look there. Who is involved there? And why? In how many powers? If you have 350 350,000 people from Wehrmacht, from Germany, fighting in Spain, what is that? And if you have now about 50 countries involved in Syrian so-called local conflict, what is that? And if we have officially 55 countries against Russia now in Ukraine, what's that? A local conflict? Really? We have to look at the whole picture and the inner laws of that picture, not at the surface, not separated pictures of that picture. Okay? In such a conclusion, I have to tell you that the nowadays war is the Third World War, of course, and practically is a war between the old world of imperialism, unified by force by USA nowadays, against all the other world, including real socialist countries and including anti-imperialist countries and movements all over the world. And of course, including the workers' movement and the communist movement all over the world. But we have to rebuild the communist movement, because if at the beginning of the next First World War we had the crash of Second International, nowadays we have the crash of the elements of the Third International. And we have to make another level of revolutionary powers. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot. I must admit I don't have a watch as a moderation. But you do.
You
But
can
I
watch
think
my
it's.
Soviet watch.
Thank you. And but is it Greek time or is it German
It's Greek
time?
time.
It's Greek time, isn't it? I was a little bit irritated. Okay, but is it 43 now? Ah, okay, good. So it's just more or less the same. Am I allowed to try and summarize very quickly what I understood? How I try, yeah, and then I open up the plenary for you. You were saying in the beginning of the imperialist era, we had the main factor of the war, or the main character of the war, was the war between imperialists, and the first victorious socialist revolution was born out of this. The Second World War was a reaction to this momentum or to the fact of having socialism. Not only, okay. So I try to also so kind of a continuation of the character of the first. Exactly, you said this. I wouldn't even find it in my notes, but yes, a continuation of the character of the first, but also a reaction to what came out of the first, be it the socialist revolution and the Soviet Union. After this, we have a situation where the continuing the world order, or let's say the era of imperialism, changes in the sense that it becomes a era on the one hand side of upcoming national liberation, the one contradiction which is between the national liberation or oppressed countries and the imperialist countries on the one hand, and counter-revolution against the existing socialist states, because out of the Second World War we have a even greater success of socialist achievements globally. And the Third World War is the situation we are in now, because this contradiction, there is no more inner imperialist contradiction. Is that, would you say yes, there is no inner imperialist contradiction in this, or it is decreasing? Maybe in this, I could put it in this, I understood you as saying there is a decreasing power, a decreasing contradiction between the imperialist countries, because I think you said it's a forced kind of war by the USA. Would you say that? Because the other imperialist countries. Okay, so I guess I didn't really. This war is not this cannot be the same war as we have in the former. Yeah, but what is exactly the character of the Third World War? Maybe, I mean, I can also open up the plenary maybe for you to pose more questions about this, but and then give you the opportunity to answer. Yeah, maybe this is the point. Okay, Simon, do you need a microphone? Here is a microphone as well. Ich glaube, Jasper, nee, there is Mikrofon. Hier. Nee, ich glaube, Jasper hat ein Mikrofon. Yeah.
Hello? Yes. Okay. First of all, thank you for the input. My question is, I came to the exact point where ITAC has stopped, and my question is, why you defined it with now 55 countries are officially fighting against Russia, and that's true, but not by by the size or the number of the countries that are involved. is not the main characteristic of a world war. This is like I understand. Okay. And I also did understand that the main factor, the main characteristic that is continuing from the first to the second and now to the third is that there's side of two imperialists fighting against each other. And this is something I didn't really see or I was not able to pinpoint in your input where the argument is made that this is now happening, or is it not happening? Maybe you could clarify this for me. And because now we are seeing, okay, it looks just like imperialism to me, and not like the new third world war. And this is another question. Can I make two? I make it quick. Imperialism.
Imperialism. It just looks like imperialism. It's not a war. It's just imperialism as it is.
Yes.
Without war or with war, because
Okay, how you are identifying imperialism?
Yeah, this is another point, because I had questions about your statement of the new stadium of imperialism that we are in now.
Stage.
The new stage of imperialism, because the ground factors of imperialism are still the same, at least how I see the world right now. And there's the question: what is new on this new stage of imperialism? I was not able to pinpoint that as well. Maybe these two questions.
Okay. I have one question there, and then I'll take.
First of all, thank you for your talk. It was very interesting. I came here from Austria, and thankfully we are not part of NATO yet, but our ruling elite is very much taking us into this direction. For example, recently we joined a sort of commitments to install anti-aircraft system, a sort of a NATO light. It's called Sky Shield. And the political situation is this, that the loudest opposition to this course is originating from the anti-immigrant far right, which is projected to win the upcoming elections in a landslide. And this is additionally complicated by the fact that some forces in the Russian elite and in the Russian state media sometimes point to these guys and say, yes, these are our people, and they will be our friends when they come to power. And I would like you to comment on this situation.
You could forward the mic to comment here.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Sæþór. Thank you for your talk. I'm here from Iceland, where we are a member of NATO. This year we had B-21s with nuclear weapons underneath pass through, as well as one of the nuclear command airplanes, an apocalypse plane, as they call it, was stationed there. It was very celebratory for the liberals in charge of Iceland. And we've also know from WikiLeaks that the CIA has been moving kidnapped people from the Middle East through Keflavik to then take them to black sites. There is not an anti-NATO movement. We do have a anti-military base organization, and we only have one military base, the American one, but they are firmly for the NATO war, as are all of our political parties. We don't have a single anti-capitalist party, and we don't have a single anti-NATO party in Iceland. I agree with your assessment that now the America and the capitalist West are in a financial crisis. They don't really have the control of the super profits to continue, bribing their middle class to keep the modern society going. But it seems like the ideological control of the narrative is so strong that there's not room to have these kind of debates with the working class, who could provide a like a counter to the NATO power. So as a place, we don't have a military and we do not manufacture weapons in Iceland, but we do have a class system where, exactly as described by Marx, to keep the power system of Iceland going. So for someone who is an who would like to avoid World War III and participate within Iceland to do that, I'm not quite sure how to phrase the question. You see that we are already in the start of World War III, but do you see room to do any kind of pushback on our country's participation before the hot portion of the war starts? Because for now, it's all in the realm of ideology, because to keep a bribed middle class, this is now a very non-violent, this is an insulated group of people who would likely not sign up to be soldiers themselves, like the various countries have, like in Taiwan and here and in the US. They don't want to send American soldiers. They want someone else's citizens to die. In Iceland, we've never had violence, but now we're flirting with the most violent nation with the US to participate. So with this all coming to a head, as you perceive, do you think there is room to for this to come to a head before it goes actual violent, when we have the undeniable proof we're in the middle of World War III? I think in 50 years it will be obvious that now was the start, assuming there's still people in 50 years. But it's maybe vague for a normal person who doesn't follow along, who doesn't have a Marxist understanding of history, that this is what we're heading into, the beguiled middle class. How do you see room to push back against World War III, the hot portion, before it actually starts up? Do you see room for that?
Okay, Jana, I will take you as well. Then.
Our opponents say that if USA loses its position, other countries, especially China, will take its place and become the same imperialists. In my opinion, the situation in the world today is unique and cannot be repeated. What do you say? Is there an economic law that a country with a market economy develops into second USA?
Okay. If you want, you can also say it in Russian. I think Dimitrios understands Russian very fluently. Okay. Do you want to answer? Because I think there are no more signs for me to.
I can try.
Please.
I want to thank you for summarizing my speech. Thank you very much. And I'd like to say that if you will pay an attention, every new so-called world war is another level of the spiral movement of the contradictions and another making of new results not expected by the first players of the former states of the war. Okay? So I am watching the wars are stages of one war as an immanent quality of imperialism, which is correlated with inner contradictions of the system and which make more free the revolutionary powers in every stage. Okay? So we have, how do we call it in the word terminology? We have the main goals, the main yes, yes, and we have the something like outcomes which are not planned by the main actors of that war. Okay, and this is the role of the revolutionary movement. If you wish, the main legacy of Leninism is that to watch on the word contradictions of imperialism, to use the imperialist contradictions, the inter-imperialist contradictions, and to push the process to the direction of the revolution. This is the role of communists. Nothing else. And this is the reason, the main reason of the anti-imperialist aspect of our common struggle. The main reason. Okay, so which are the differences? The differences between the First World War and the Second is clear enough, I suppose. The Second War, the Third World War is a continuing Second World War, but in other conditions. Which are the other conditions? Firstly, we have a new stage of imperialism. Why a new stage of imperialism? Because even during the beginning of the 20th century, during the research of Lenin on imperialism, we had, in the place of the export of commodities, we had the export of capital. Okay? But in both cases, we have the level of the market. The market is a surface level of the productive relations of capitalism. Okay? Including the market of investments, etc. Okay? In nowadays, we have such monopolistic groups which are organizing at the level of the production practically all over the world processes. This is an inner difference between the imperialism of the beginning of 20th century, of the middle of 20th century, and of nowadays. We have dimension of labor all over the world, and we have the structure at even the technological and organizing level of the labor, of the production, all over the world. We have, talking in an analogy again, in Marxist Capital, you can find the formal coordination of the labor to the capital and the real coordination to the capital. Which is the difference? The difference is that the real coordination of labor to the capital is the technical one, the technical necessity of the device of the collective labor is a technical, technological necessity for the production. Okay? We have such a necessity not in a separated enterprise industry as such we had in the middle of 19th century. We have such processes all over the world now. This is the difference. Because we have another level of scientific technological revolution in the production. What that means? That means that we have the second level, the second stage of the scientific technological revolution, in which we have networks which are not only at the level of organizing the production using informatics, using digital technologies, computers, etc. This is the real production, not only information as a meal of organizing production, but the real production is a all over the world network. This is unique. And this is a result of the new technological revolution, and this is some kind of answer to the scientific and technological progress of early socialism of 20th century. Do you understand? You see, the periodization of the stages of the capitalism is a part of the periodization of the stages of the history of the humanity. And the history of the humanity, beginning from the 20th century, includes the socialist revolutions and socialist countries, includes the anti-imperialist struggle. If you are not taking into account the anti-imperialist struggle and the socialist revolutions, you can't identify the real nowadays stage of imperialism. That's my point, my main point now. And of course, we had, I suppose you understand the differences between the Second World War and the Third World War. Why? Because, for example, during the so-called Cold War, we had two superpowers, two global systems, antagonism between them, and at the military technical level, they could destroy each other and all the planet. Okay? But from the economic point of view, the power of the Soviet Union was not such big as, for example, the nowadays power of China. In nowadays, we have the legacy, or exactly a part of the legacy of Soviet Union in military, at the military and technological level of nowadays Russia, a part. Let me say that I'm watching all the processes, the main processes of technological development of weapon systems of Russia. They are just a part of the plans of the Soviet Union. All of them, including super hypersonic weapons, etc., including new physical principles, plasma technologies, for example. Okay? This is all planning, the rocket system, the space system, all that is continuing the research planning of Soviet Union. And a part of that, in a specific way, is what we see in China and Korea. I mean, PDPK, Public Republic of Korea, okay? This is a continuing directions of the socialist planning of the military technologies. This is not by accident. So we have a counter-revolutionary regime in Russia. The new bourgeois class of Russia was trying to make themselves imperialists, but they were kicked out of the world market economy. Nobody was waiting them there. And I'm describing in my writings step by step how they make them clear that they could never become imperialists. They are not giving them the possibility to become imperialists. Even to buy some gasoline stations in USA, they didn't give them the possibility. To buy some ports infrastructures, they didn't give them the possibility. To buy here in Germany the Opel industry, daughter of General Motors, they didn't give them the possibility to the Russians. Okay, to the PS group from France, they gave, of course. So in any step, they gave them to be clear that they are not able to become imperialists. The imperialist system is closed, and it's closed by force, by leading power of United States. Okay? Wishful thinking, of course, from a part of the new bourgeoisie of Russia is taking place. Of course, wishful thinking, but just wishful thinking. Okay?
Because I think there is one point which maybe could be clarified for me, and maybe also for you, listeners, that I'm still not that clear about. I understand that what you're describing means less contradiction between imperialist states. Because what you described just after the question was posed about what is the real character of the new era in this new era of imperialism, you answered actually, in my words, more centralization, more concentration of capital and power. Well, yes. And the question is, if this is the case, and now with the description of the closed imperialist system and center, this also means less contradiction among imperialists. There is a center controlling. I will now pose a question according to this, because it has a lot of implications. Less contradiction does not mean no contradiction, to be understood rightly. Not no contradiction, less contradiction. In this center of imperialism, center of power of imperialism, there is one imperialism which is controlling the other imperialist countries. Okay. Is this a qualitative change, or is it just a quantitative? Is there a real new quality of imperialism, or is this just a quantitative process which has the same quality as is concentration and centralization of capital means monopolization. Monopolization does not only mean economic monopolization, it also means centralized power. And if this is the case, on the one hand, it means it is still the same imperialism as Lenin described, and it's the logical consequence of what he described that it has to become exactly this way. And because it's the last stage of capitalism, it must give birth to socialist struggle and revolution, etc., which negates what is going on the other hand. So is this a description of what you mean? And if yes, still the question, is there any new quality about this era? Or is it just a quantitative rise of what is in its essence the same quality, which is centralization and concentration of capital, which is going on still further and further, and necessarily must lead exactly to this stage where we are now. And it leads to, maybe to put it in this phrase of general crisis of capitalist system, or is there still a lot to go for, like technologically and in the sense of rising productivity, and or will this Third World War? I'm not still sure about the Third World War, I must admit, because what I'm getting at is that a Third World War or a world war must be such a big war that it brings the possibility for the crisis to get out of for capitalism or for imperialist countries to get out of this crisis. So they must really destroy so much that they can really get out of it. So I'm not sure if you could get what I wanted to get at, but maybe you can react to this. But there are also some other questions you wanted to answer.
This is very useful. Dear comrade, I think it's very, very useful what you are asking about. Everybody could agree with you if you are focusing separated to the capitalist countries and the imperialist countries. If you are focusing separated to that countries, it seems like that. It seems like the ultra-imperialism of Kautsky. Okay? But we don't have ultra-imperialism. It's not achievable to have ultra-imperialism. It's not achievable because of the general crisis of capitalism beginning from the October Revolution. Without taking in account the general crisis, continuing general crisis of capitalism, we can't understand the new states. And the new states don't mean that the Lenin's approach is a bad one or not useful. When Lenin was writing imperialism and all the works about imperialism, we had no socialism. We had the preparation for the socialist revolution. Do you think that even in 1922, if he had the time and the power, biological power to write, he would write the same book? Do you think such stupid Marxist, the Lenin? But nowadays, we think that nothing changes. For example, the leadership of Communist Party of Greece says we have the same situation such as in 1914. Why? Because I like it. This is a good slogan for commodities, but this is not an argument for science and for revolution. Do you understand? To say that we have the same situation after more than a century is just a declaration of your own stupidity. Nothing more. Nothing more. Anti-scientific approach, stupid approach, irrational approach. So, for example, I'm going back to the character of, for example, nowadays Russia, okay? More than 80% of the foreign economic activity of Russia, do you know what it is? Do you know what it is? Yes. Export of capital? Hello? export of natural goods, energy, resources. This is by definition a colony and semi-colony. And if you will make, that's the reason I'm talking about wannabe of some oligarchs in Russia. They wannabe, of course, but who give them the possibility to be? And if you will check the structure of the all over the world my English is very bad. All over the world, the profits all over the world, the monopolistic profits. You will understand that the China economy have economic activities abroad in foreign countries, making infrastructure, and I'm coming to Jana's question now, mainly in infrastructure projects of Africa, Latin America, Asia, etc. The road and the ring is what? Infrastructure. For what? For having more easy economic relations and the export of commodities. Export of commodities is the characteristic of imperialism? Tell me, please. Even by Lenin. So, we have to take all that in account to have a decision about the character of the war and the character of the main forces involved in the war. For example, somebody says, including the collective wisdom of the nowadays leadership of Communist Party of Greece, they call themselves like that they are the collective wisdom of the party. Probably to try to have a fight against the collective wisdom. Where is the collective wisdom? Okay, they say that we have the number 2 imperialism now, who wants to be the number 1 imperialist. Have a look in my article about the 10 steps of stupidity of new opportunism and revisionism, and you will understand what they are meaning. According to their so-called theory, pyramid theory, this is no reason for another imperialist power to take another place of a former imperialist power. Why? Because everybody is imperialism. And in how way they will have more power if the power is, by definition, separated in a very solid construction of pyramid? Why? Do they have exploitation, imperialist form of exploitation, sphere exploitation, using the super profits? They are refusing that element of Leninist political economy. So how you can explain what is happening now? Is China a capitalist country and imperialist country? Tell me please, in which imperialist country, by definition of Lenin, we have the, how is in Lenin's book, the unification of the financial capital, banking capital, with the industrial. Do you know something about the banking financial capital in China? Banking sector as a whole is a public property and is under control of planning economy property. Tell me please, where in the imperialism we have such a unification? Where? And tell me, please, if they are imperialist and capitalist country, why the structural crises and all the crises of capitalism practically are not touching them? Why? Because they're imperialists. You have to prove that. So in Norway we have the number 2 USA. This is a totally different situation, totally different. And to tell you the truth, we have a unique situation in which, in some way, by accident, Chinese model of building socialism became the most powerful of nowadays, using even the anti-Sovietism of the Chinese government of 20th century. This is a tragedy in history, but this is a fact. They used all that. They were being used by USA and monopolists all over the world. Why? Because they had their industrialization under the planning economy control, of course, and not given the real estate as a property to the monopolists just for concrete period. They have to use all that, okay? They had their industrialization, taking every know-how, new technologies, etc., and making their own R&D centers and developing the science nowadays, which is higher in the most crucial aspects of fundamental science and new technologies all over the world. They were using the industrialization as a parallel process of deindustrialization of main imperialist countries. Nowadays, what is trying to do the government of USA? Is trying to reindustrialize their own economy. Is it achievable nowadays? I suppose only a part. But they can achieve that in which way? Destroying the industry of German economy, of French economy, etc. They are cannibalizing each other. Do you understand? They are cannibalizing each other nowadays. Why? Because of that war, Third World War, we have more powerful movement of anti-imperialism, which says actually to the imperialist axis led by USA, enough is enough. Niger is standing up and they say, we are not going to sell you for 80 cents our uranium, which in the marketplace is 200 euros. Enough is enough. So what that means? That means, pay attention to that. That means that they are putting limits to the possibilities of the capital of the main imperialist countries to parasitize on the body of the whole humanity. And according to those kind of parasitism, is the only way to have the possibility to buy your own working class in your country. So they have, they are facing with the limits of buying and manipulating their own working class. Excuse me, what else is necessary for us to understand the revolutionary potential of that war and that state? What else do you want? I think that becomes more clear and clear that we have a part to take in that war, This is not a typical imperialist war. The character of the war is deeply different. The differences are deeper than the differences between First and Second World War. And the agenda of that war is more revolutionary than any other war. The point is, the main contradiction is that the revolutionary powers are more destroyed than in ever other states. So we have to rebuild them according to other principles, to other level of scientific approach to the reality, to other level of revolutionary theory. But what will happen with some countries, for example, like Iceland? Small country with a strategic significance for the world war and the world processes. A country without army to fight against whom? In the middle of the northern Atlantic Ocean. You are just a platform. They are using you as a platform. They were using you as a platform for the financial capital for some decades, including British imperialist capital. Okay? And you had the crisis of the end of first decade of our century and the beginning of the next. And in some way you solved that crisis. In some way. Not changing the system, but you solve something. You solve something in which way? Taking more sovereignty. You took more sovereignty. Суверенитет по-русски. Как будет по-немецки или по-английски?
Am I allowed to dip in again? Because I just realized
Just,
I will give you the last word so you can.
Not last word,
okay.
Just in addition to the question
okay.
of our comrade. So you have to fight for the independence of your country and for equal relations with other countries, and you have to fight to throw out military bases of imperialists. This is your mission to the world revolutionary process. And believe me, this is very necessary mission. Because we have very crucial bases, military bases, in your country. Why? We have very crucial bases. Why? We have very similar duties for the revolutionary movement. Excuse me.
Go on then. Go on. Okay, so that was in the sense that you have finished. Okay. It is 5:30. Sorry, not 6, 5. We have 2 hours now.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we're finished. 2 hours. And now we have a break. Yeah, sorry. We had you to. I would love to give you, but you could.
We can discuss it
go on
during
the break. During the break,
okay.
and this. But if you pose a question, I guess Dimitrios wants to answer the question. And then it brings us to problems in the schedule.
To the KKE in the Greece, is there
we are trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We are trying to do that.
but not not yet.
But this is a question you can really ask in the break, because it has nothing to do with what we are talking about now. It has a lot to do with it, but it's not the main same topic. Okay, thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much, Dimitrios, for bringing us through
Thank you.
very difficult steps to understand. Okay, I guess we will continue discussing and reading and trying to understand what this times bring for us and what our tasks are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.